Welcome to The Starting Point, a program produced by Speranța TV, which is Hope Channel Romania. I'm Adrian Bocăneanu, and I have the pleasure and the privilege to interview men and women from around the world and to ask them about their starting point in life, in education, in a career, and most importantly, in faith and service. I hope you will enjoy these stories of life and will find here strong reasons to set a new starting point for ourselves. I'm so glad you have accepted my invitation, so welcome to the starting point. Usually I begin asking questions about early childhood, early memories. So what and where and how was your starting point in life and in faith?
My starting point in life? Some of my earliest memories were when my parents were, we traveled a lot, and at one point found my dad had a job, and we were living in sort of a smaller community, and my parents were debating about where to send me to school, so it was kindergarten area. And my parents had debated, like, should we send to a Christian school, a non-Christian school, this type of Christian, that type of Christian, and ended up deciding, they had like a little agreement that whichever one was closer is where I would go. And so I ended up at a Christian school, and I remember that those are where a lot of my early memories come from, learning about, I don't remember a lot before that because I was too little, so kindergarten with, I remember learning about Jesus in school and being very captivated by the whole idea, because it was very different, before that. I was into things little kids were into, like, in the world, and it was very different to hear.
So why were they debating, first of all, between secular kindergarten or Christian, and then you said between different branches of Christianity? Was your family divided by the way of faith?
Yeah. My dad grew up one religion, and my mother grew up a different one. Well, and my mother wasn't particularly Christian. She was sort of the name only, go to church on Christmas and Easter, or whenever somebody gets married or dies. And but my dad had been raised in the religion, and he was very adamant that I should attend a Bible-based Christian school that teaches that, because that's what he grew up with. So even though they didn't really go to church or any of that,
they wanted to give a Christian heritage to
right.
you.
Yeah. So they were very, my dad was very concerned with that, and so my mom had said, well, we'll see whatever school is nearby, and that's the one we'll send her to. And all of the other schools were between 45 minutes and an hour away, and the one school that they found that teaches Bible-based religion was like 2 miles away, close enough to where I could actually like walk on nice days.
So you have good memories from that little school, and for how long have you been studying there?
Well, I was there for 2 years, and I'm actually still friends with the teacher.
Really?
She and my mom became really good friends, and so my mother passed away a few years ago, but the teacher at the time, and was her best friend for, how old am I? 20-something years, 25 years or something, and I still keep in contact with her. But we moved around a lot after that, so. But yeah, I was there for 2 years.
Were you the only child?
No, I have a younger sister.
A younger sister, so you were the first to make those decisions for. Yeah,
and it was interesting because while we were there in that particular church, I really was captivated with the religion, as I mentioned, and with the Bible and studying and all that. And I would beg my parents to go to church because I was learning about it in school.
Yes.
And and my friends all went to church, and so I was like, well, I played sports, I did that sort of thing, and I had other things that I was doing on the weekends, and and I ended up convincing my parents to go to church, and sorry, I'm falling over my words, but so my father came back to the church, my mother, joined, and they both were very, very involved after that, very involved in the whole idea, but it all started just because of an argument over where to go to school.
Interesting, and because you also insisted them to take you to the church.
Yeah, and Dad was like, well, do you want to play soccer? Do you want to go to church? And I was like, I'm going to go to church. So.
Interesting. Yeah. What kind of a child were you?
Yeah.
That says a lot about, not only about yourself, but also about the good spirit of the school, the atmosphere, the appealing way they presented religion, the Bible and Christ and things like that. And so you also said that your parents became very involved in the activities of the
yes.
church. Like what kind of activities?
So my father was very interested in giving Bible studies, teaching. So he had served as a church deacon, and he was always into personal ministry. So he wrote, before they had Bible study guides like we have now, where you can write and someone will send you a guide or whatever.
Yes.
My dad wrote a whole bunch of them himself, and so he would work with different ministries locally and give Bible studies or train people to give Bible studies. As we changed locations for my dad's job, in each new church, he would, set up some of that, either as a deacon. He served as an elder later, and when he retired in the church that they were in for the end of their lives, the last 20 years, he had done all kinds of studies and stuff like that, and that was a big thing for him, was ministering and whatever. And my mother, my mother was interested in ministry as well. She did. She worked with kids, so we had youth groups, and so for years she ran youth groups for little kids by herself, and she taught Bible studies to kids, and she also ran the luncheons at the church. So they had a lunch every week, and for visitors or for the church members or whatever. And so she would coordinate that and did her ministry out of that as well.
Oh, she was very busy.
My mother was tireless. I would love to have half of the energy at 30-something that she had at 60-something.
Yeah. What was the size, the shape, the composition, I should say, of the church?
It was very small, very traditional, it's a rural church. So, I know the viewers can't see this church, but I think it was about the size here, about maybe 100 people to start, and it had grown quite a bit. So they had toyed with 2 services and all kinds of other stuff, and would end up setting up chairs in the lobby, and so it did grow over time. But when I was little, it was a very small church.
So Mother was also involved in helping people feel comfortable at the church. Organizing or cooking a lot.
Yeah. My mother was a fantastic cook. Yeah, she also the way they sort of structured their luncheons and that ministry there was because it was small. It would be a family or two, because we never had 30 visitors in one week, and if we did, we probably knew they were coming. It's like a visiting choir or something. Mostly it's like one little family that would come. And so my mother would coordinate to make sure every week that someone could host, either they would host at their house in town, or they would host at the church school's fellowship hall or something like that.
So church and school were together on the same compound.
Yeah, they were. So you had the church, and then there was a hill, and up at the top of the hill was the school and all that. And so they had a nice little kitchen for the kids, and that's where they would host. Like I said, because being a small church in a very small town, everybody lived spread out. And so if somebody lived close enough that they felt comfortable, like,
Sure.
you know, we're not driving people 50 miles out of the way, they would maybe take them to their house. But so she sort of left that up, but she was more the coordinator. So she would just make sure that that everything was covered. And if nobody could cover, then she would cover in their place.
Do you remember ever helping your mother?
I did, but I was involved in other things in
Other
church.
things.
I was bulletin secretary, so I did a lot of our communication stuff. I did some audiovisual. I did, and I really liked doing more like the daycare side. So I would run like childcare for services, or when we would have revivals, or when we have special meetings and stuff. I usually would run childcare.
Do you remember ever joining your father when he was studying the Bible with? Yeah.
Yeah, he would take us along. I never really got into doing that with him, but a lot of times I would go, and it would just to participate or whatever. And I helped with when he was doing his Bible studies and stuff. I would help proofread and help make sure that they looked nice and they were ready to go and that sort of thing when I was a little bit older. So
all your memories from then are so happy?
No, I actually was I think my parents were very involved, and my parents loved the Lord a lot. They really did. But I never quite understood the relationship aspect of the religion, the relationship piece, and the love of God. So to me, it was a series of things I liked to do. Like, I liked to work with the kids, and I liked to study the Bible. I loved to study. So I would, and do Bible trivia, and we had competitions, like even with some of the other religions in town, like we would have Bible trivia competitions and, and things like that. But I never quite got the power, the relationship, as I said. So when I got into my teen years, so when I was little, I loved everything about church. I loved everything about studying. But when I got into my teen years and I started facing challenges, I had a lot more trouble.
What kind of challenges?
Being in the world, dealing with the idea of philosophical, or even
lifestyle.
Lifestyle. So you have, being in a small town, we didn't have a lot of kids around, and a lot of my friends from church went away to academy, but my parents couldn't afford to send me to academy, so I was homeschooled. And I was involved with other people in the area, but they weren't necessarily Christians. They weren't necessarily good influences. And so I was always trying to do better. I was always trying to follow the rules. I have to follow the rules. But because I didn't understand the foundation for the rules, and I didn't know I didn't know how to have the relationship with God. I didn't understand that that's where that came from. I just felt like I was failing all the time.
Never good enough.
Never good enough.
Yeah. If you try to please God,
right,
you are never going to do that.
Right.
If you know how high are God's requirements.
Right. Right. And so as a kid, as a kid, you accept it. Like, you don't think about this when you're really little.
Sure.
It's just like, this makes me happy, Jesus makes me happy. When I got into my teen years, I couldn't find that joy in it anymore. And it sort of, the devil, as I wandered farther away, the devil replaced it with a fear. So a lot of my religious experiences were based out of fear, because I wanted to be good enough so that I didn't end up, punished or, whatever. But that's sort of where I got to in my teen years.
What were the consequences for you and for your life?
Well, when I went to college, I went to a university that was non-Christian, very secular.
What did you choose to study?
Psychology. Well, originally I intended to study engineering,
Oh.
but I ended up the program, the school I went to did not have a program for that. And financially, it was a better opportunity to go there than other places. And so I ended up studying psychology and
Quite a change.
German. Yeah. So German language and literature.
I see. Interesting.
But in college, I had sort of, since I didn't understand my faith, I had sort of given up on it. It was one of those where, the hypocrisy is somewhat amazing, but I would say, like, I believe the Bible, I believe in God, but I can't do it. That's not for me anymore. That's not what I want to do. And I went out and I basically walked away completely. I had friends on some level would be, they would go to church, but they would still do their own thing. And I really couldn't, for my own mental health, I couldn't do that. So I was like,
live a double life.
Yeah, I was like, I just walked away. And I was, it's like, I tried this, didn't work. Let's try something else.
Did it satisfy?
No. No, the world never satisfies in that way.
Especially one with the knowledge and with the understanding you had. Maybe for someone who doesn't know there is something else.
Yeah.
Maybe, I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah.
But
I think a lot of it is you just lie to yourself, and without going into a ton of details, it's basically you chase everything the world has to offer, and no matter how hard you look, it never satisfies. It never gives you what you want, because what you're looking for is peace and happiness. And sorry, like this, I get emotional. You're looking for peace and happiness and satisfaction in life, but what the world offers you is slavery. True enough. It's you're a slave to consumption. You're a slave to entertainment. You're a slave to pleasure. You're a slave to all these things. If it's like, the world offers so many different kinds of addictions, and we laugh about certain things like, oh, I'm addicted to my phone, or I'm addicted to whatever, but addiction has become such a thing in the life and in the world in general. And for those of us who are trying to run away from something, it became really easy to fall into a lot of those traps, a lot of the devil's traps, where if I dull the pain this way, if I can make the Holy Spirit go away if I do this, this, and this. And so you always sort of hear the call, you always sort of hear that, your conscience basically, and it takes more and more and more over time to dull that. So if you're, for me, I was involved with a lot of like usage of substances and that sort of thing, and had developed a real problem with it, because you just, it never meets the need that you're looking for.
You need more. I mean, you take more, hoping that you'll be able to cope, but actually you fall lower and lower and lower. Right.
You drink a certain amount, and then you have the consequences the next day. You suffer for it, so you drink more. And because over time, with anything, you develop a tolerance, and that's that piece where your addiction just gets worse until it starts destroying you.
At that time, you were studying psychology. Now, many modern people look at psychology as the savior.
Yeah.
Did it help you?
No.
Not
in psychology, for me, even with that, I was interested in studying how people think, as opposed to looking for meaning in that. But it is not. And there's a lot that I don't think psychology is a bad thing by any means.
I didn't mean. I didn't mean. Yeah.
But it has to be in coordination with the Bible and the Holy Spirit, because God gave us these amazing minds and amazing capabilities, and we can't understand that, and even even use that outside of the context. I mean, you can, therapy is not bad, but if your problem is you're running away from God, all the therapy in the world isn't going to help you.
What were the reaction of the people around you? How did your family relate it to you during that period? Were they able to know, to understand a little bit of your struggles, and or did you try to keep them away from you? How do you remember?
With my dad, I never wanted to disappoint my dad.
Mm-hmm.
So for the
Like
most
God,
part,
like
yeah,
God, you know.
yeah, same sort of thing. With my dad, I'm fairly ashamed to say I mostly just lied to him. And when he would say, "Are you going to church? Are you studying? Are you doing whatever?" That is the place where I did lead the double life. So I would still sit and have some of these discussions with my father. Bible discussions or discussions about life in general and morality and whatever.
Interesting.
I would still have those with my dad because I didn't want, like I said, I didn't want to disappoint my dad. But for the most part, my mother knew. My mother had tried for a long time. She prayed. I know she prayed for me. She said she prayed for me. But I was resistant, and so for the most part, I think my mother was like, I don't know what to do with her, so I'll just be supportive, and I'm here. She was supportive. Yeah, as much as she could be. She did not accept what I was doing with my life.
Sure.
She didn't accept that, and she would try. So I was always a musician growing up, and I would play in church and stuff. So my mother would schedule. She would guilt me into coming home to play music for church to get me into the church. Because from the time I went to college until a few years ago, I did not willingly go to church for any reason. But it made my mother happy for me to play music. So she would try on the sly once a month to try to get me to come up there and be like, oh, we don't have anybody for this week. We don't have anybody for that. We need this and we need that. And I'm like, do you really? But I would do it because it made my mother happy. But she tried that. But for the most part, she sort of backed off because both of my parents had been in the world. Both of my parents had been severe alcoholics and other problems in life in general, which I won't go into. But so they also understood that, I guess, pushing me wasn't going to make me better. I had to come to a point where I got myself together.
As it happened to them.
Yeah.
Actually.
Yeah. So they understood that.
What about your kindergarten teacher? Did she know about your condition then?
She did, and she and I didn't really talk a whole lot at that time, but she talked to my mother, so she was a great source of support for my mother. So and her kids, the teacher's kids, also had struggles. Her oldest was a girl who I don't think she ever really went away from God. I think she was much stronger. Her son had some problems, and so she and my mother were able to relate to each other.
I see. But for you personally, was there anyone able to connect with you and to be with you in your despair, in your...
I really sort of pushed everyone away because there's a certain amount of shame that comes from it.
Sure.
When you know that what you're doing is wrong, you know that your choices are bad. And so for the most part, I cut people out of my life. So if you wanted to, if people wanted to talk about worldly things or whatever, I would have those conversations. I did not have a lot of religious conversations unless it was strictly fact-based doctrine. So I would have arguments about a doctrine, but I didn't have a lot of, I didn't have a lot of discussions even when friends would be like, oh, I had this experience with the Lord, and I'd be like, okay, whatever, So.
And that was for how many years, Lisa?
That was it was about 13 years.
13 years.
Yeah, 12 or 13, because I was about 17 when
What were you thinking for your later life? How did you imagine your life? What was your mental picture of yourself? Did you think, yeah, I am now in this situation, but I know the truth and I'm going to come back and I'll be again a good person? Or you said, no, this is not. What do you remember? Or both, sometimes?
Sometimes both. So I always said I would not, I always said I would not marry an atheist. I wouldn't have kids that didn't go, much like my father, my kids would be Christians and that sort of thing. But I did go back and forth. Some days it was, I'm having my fun now. At some point I'll look into going back, whenever I'm not so lazy or I'm not so whatever. I'll look at going back, but for the most part, I didn't think too much about it, because that's the thing with being that wrapped up in the lifestyle and an addiction and whatever. You don't, as an addict, you're not a very good long-term planner. Your concerns for the most part are, whatever the next thing is. You don't think a lot about your life in general unless you get to a point where you have to, but it's always the next experience or the next substance or the next whatever.
Short term.
Short term. Yeah, I mean, at most it's like, in 5 years I want to have a job doing this, or I want to have this improvement. But your long-term goals are, it's hard to focus on long-term goals when your short-term needs are
so imperative, so compelling.
Yeah.
Like I'm going to die if I don't have the substance.
Yeah, I'm going to die if I don't get the drink. I'm going to die, or, and you would, and it's also, for me, it was the piece of not being able to be comfortable and alone with myself because I didn't like who I was. And so with that, you're always chasing entertainment. So I never gave myself time to really think too much about my life, because I knew my life was in, a downward spiral, and so you didn't spend a lot of time.
Were you able still to function in college, to take a job and to keep it?
Yeah, I graduated with very good grades. Really? I was always a good student. It was, because a lot of, you can balance, even as someone who's heavily involved in these lifestyles, you can balance those things out if you try. It takes a little bit of effort, but you work your way around it. And no, I was a good student. I was always good with work. It was my personal life that was sort of a wreck.
What kind of work did you have?
For a long time, I work in a library. I have worked there since 2004, so. Since 2005, so 14 years. I used to do stacks, so for those who don't know what that is, shelving books, helping patrons, but from the psychology side, I got a lot of knowledge about statistics. The university started becoming more interested, the library I work at's a university, so the university started becoming more interested in data and data analysis, and so I started becoming more and more involved with that, and eventually switched over to where that was my primary job. So I sort of worked my way up in that respect.
So in a way, you created your job?
Sort of, yeah.
Very interesting.
I sort of did, yeah. I'm a nerd for a living.
Yeah. Still remaining for a few moments on that period of your life, looking into retrospects, can you see some glimpses, some moments when you had glimpses of hope, maybe some I don't know, persons who exemplified for you the beauty of faith or the goodness of hope? Do you have any bright spots there?
My memory at that time period, partly because of stress and like working all the time in school and whatnot, my memory is not great, but I have some interesting things. So I had found a study guide on Psalms that I had done around that time period. I have no recollection of ever picking that up and doing it, but I had gone through and like meticulously examined the Psalms. So even through that time period, I can see little places where God was working, and I was sort of reaching out, but I don't have, because like I said, I had pushed everybody away, so I didn't have a lot of people around to exemplify that. I surrounded myself mostly with non-Christians, or like Christian in name only, or people that like, oh yeah, I believe in God, he's up there somewhere. So I really I had some good examples of people that I had grown up with that I remembered. And I remembered a time when I really enjoyed that, but my life was completely disconnected from it.
Well, enough with that. I hope it was not too uncomfortable for you.
Oh, that's okay.
What happened? Because you are no longer in that situation.
I am no
Praise
longer
the Lord.
So I had gotten to a point of where, so like I said, for a long time I was very functional.
Yes.
I was able to maintain, I was able to do what I needed to do, and I finally hit a point where I wasn't.
Oh.
And I got very sick from lifestyle choices and from what I was doing at the time, and was like basically in bed. I couldn't get out. I had severe alcohol poisoning. I had other problems going on, and I realized that I needed to do something. And so somewhere in my mind, which was just sick at the time, I reached out to God and said the first genuine prayer I had said in a very long time. And it was, just help me. And, you know, God spoke to my mind and he said, do you want to die? Because that's what you're looking at. If you keep down this road, you're going to die.
You knew that thought or that voice was from God. How did you know?
How did I know? I don't know. It's sort of that, because I kept talking, and I was looking for a way to, I was looking for something, and I said, please help me. And the response to please help me was, well, what are you going to do? Like, you can say you're going to do this or that or whatever, but if you have to make a decision. Do you want to die or do you not want to die? Because if you are not willing to, point yourself, and that's sort of that long-term piece, like long-term, what are you looking at here? Like, not right now. And the reason I say I know the voice was from God is in that moment, I felt with that the need just to reach out and to study. And so I dragged myself out of bed, and I went and found my father's Bible, which I had put away just because it was sentimental. And so I pulled it out and I started reading, and I kept talking. I kept talking to God and kept hearing the voice as I was reading, like, it's the compassion, the peace of like, it's okay, but you have to make your choice.
Do you remember what portions of the Bible did you begin reading when you started reading it again?
Yeah, I started reading the Gospels. I started with Matthew. I read Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, which, I mean, they're difficult, I guess, because you see the expectation that God has, but when you're reading and you are also relying on the Holy Spirit to guide you, you start to see a lot more of the love of God. And I started, for the first time, to actually feel peace.
How long it took for you from that penetrating question, then to read the Bible, to regaining peace? Have an idea? It was days, weeks, months?
Regaining, I mean, it was within the same day I started to. Day. I mean, it was that piece of making a decision to like actually, and I'm not saying I fixed my life right away or anything like that, or that everything was perfect. I still have a long way to go. But it was simply opening it up and just saying, God, help me, was enough to give me at least a certain amount of peace.
The same day?
The same day.
Fantastic.
It was an absolute miracle to even, because it's that message that everything I had been looking for was right here. I didn't need all of the things I had been chasing for so long.
Yes. And have you been able to continue
Studying?
studying and keeping that renewed peace and faith? As
Yeah.
you said, it was not perfect from the beginning. It cannot be. It would be foolish to expect something
Yeah.
like that. Yeah.
Well, yes. I mean, and it takes a lot. You have to work at it. I have my good days and I have my bad days. I know that
You say that at the present tense.
the present tense. I mean, because we all should be growing. We get better, but you know, my days where I get up and I start with a devotional, and I start with prayer, and I wait for that voice, that connection. Those are the days that I do well. The days that I run through my devotional because I'm in a rush, I'm running late. Okay, you know, I'll say a couple of words, I may read a couple of Bible verses and run off because, you know, that's what I do in the morning. Those days are not so good. You know, I may lose my temper, I may have other issues, something may happen, but God is very patient. He is very patient with me.
Absolutely. May I ask how it was for you to push away alcohol from your life?
It took a minute. It took a little bit. Alcohol was very difficult because a lot of my friends drank. I was a very heavy drinker. I was a very heavy smoker, and so a lot of your friends, when you are in that lifestyle, are people who do what you do.
Sure.
Because, you know, the average person, you know, who doesn't participate in that, you either do or you don't. You kind of sort of live in that world. Alcohol took a while. It didn't happen overnight. I would love to say that, you know, I picked up my Bible and I found peace and everything was great. No, it didn't happen that way. And it really, you have to, because you start to have to change your whole lifestyle. You have to change who you go out with. You have to change where you go and what you do. So, I mean, it may not be that you have to give up your friendships, but perhaps if you're trying not to drink, you shouldn't hang out in bars. You know, just as a thought. But that was one of the pieces where, you know, most of us slide, we slip, and we have not necessarily currently, but you know, when I was coming back, I was studying, and as I was studying, I would not necessarily feel I needed it, and I have had prayer. I have been on my hands and knees on the floor praying for God to take it away. I have also had instances where I just fail, like for whatever reason in the moment. You make a decision to do it, and it was a struggle, and I don't have an easy answer for that. It's just over time, God, if you trust Him and you focus and you pray for it, He'll take it away.
What about smoking?
Same thing. Well, smoking was easier actually.
For some people, it's worse.
For most people, it's worse because it's more addictive. But for me, most of the smoking came in coordination with the drinking. So if you stop the drinking, for me, it was easier to quit smoking.
Interesting.
But like I said, both of them were struggles that I dealt with for quite a while after that. It didn't go away. Smoking, they have things you can do like patches or gum or whatever. So as far as the actual physical act of doing it, it was much easier for me to get rid of that.
In America, smoking is not very popular.
It's not very popular. Yeah.
I think it comes also with kind of a social stigma, more than alcohol.
Yeah.
I think,
Yeah, it's acceptable in the world to drink. It's not really these days acceptable to smoke, and in that respect, it was a little easier because to smoke you have to go outside, you have to go stand away somewhere in the rain, and then you come in and everybody's like, you smell bad. So in America, it's a little bit easier with that because there's not necessarily peer pressure to smoke unless, like I said, with my friends there's some because they still smoked. But as far as being in the world, like, oh, well, I don't smoke at work anymore, everybody's like, oh, thank goodness.
All during this time, you were still alone? I mean, did you reach out to other Christians to share your struggles and your victories and your hopes with them
Yeah,
at what point?
So I started reading, this was a little bit before Christmas of that year. And so I read the whole Bible and I started reading other supplemental stuff. And around Christmas I decided to go back to church.
Really?
And I was very happy to be back, but at the same time you feel like the prodigal son. Like I don't belong here. I hadn't quite found my feet yet.
You felt like that.
Yeah, I felt like an outsider. I felt like I didn't belong there at all. And
excuse me, you returned to a place you have visited before?
Yeah, I had gone to, so the little church that I go to now was the first church I went to when I moved to the city.
So people recognized you?
Not really, because it had been 13 years since I had been there.
Oh.
But a couple of folks were kind enough to reach out to me, and I actually made a good friend with someone who had sort of dealt with some of the same struggles that I had, similar background, and that became a really good support for me. Like when it's like, you know, I'm having one of those days, I can't cope, and you know, you're able to share stories, share your testimonies, share encouragement back and forth, and that made a huge difference.
Finally, someone to be with you, to understand you, and to support you. Finally.
Yeah, and I made a couple of friends, and I'm naturally very shy, so I'm not the person who will walk into church and start introducing themselves. I sort of hang back and like. And it took me a few times. So it took about 6 months of like showing up once in a while to church to really start interacting with people, because it took a while to get past the inferiority complex, the idea that I didn't belong there. And there were two people that really helped me with that. One was a church leader who was like, I've been where you, not necessarily the level of the rock bottom where you were, but I've experienced the world. I've seen, what it's like to go from that to coming back. And then this other friend that I was talking about, they both were very supportive and gave me a lot of hope, because they're both very spiritual people and love God a lot. And it gave me hope that, because you feel behind. It's like, okay, I remember these things from when I was a kid, but everybody's having discussions and they're talking and you're like,
and you can't speak with the language of a child.
Right, yeah. I'm like, I can't, so, but to realize that God will bring you up. He'll bring you up to speed. He will, sorry, here I go again. He'll bring you up to speed, and he will teach you everything you need to know when you need to know it. And that's sort of what I got from these folks that I was talking to, that you can still, you don't have to stay the child. You don't have to stay in that place.
Sure. Lisa, do you have a Bible character you like it the most?
I like Elijah.
Elijah, why?
Because Elijah, I identify with Elijah. I identify with Elijah. I identify with, him on Mount Carmel. He's, tormenting the priest because he knows God is better. He has all the faith in the world. And and as soon as God does his miracle and sends Elijah on the next mission, and Jezebel says, I'm going to kill you, and he runs off into the desert, and, he goes in hiding and wishes to die, and it's like, really? But at the same time, I get that. I understand that piece of the walk where it's like, you have your highs, you have your lows, you have your good days, you have your bad days, and as long as you come back to God, he will strengthen your faith, and he will always bring you back if you let him. And so that's why I like Elijah.
That would be a good conclusion, but we still have a few minutes. God will bring you back if...
God will bring you back if you just trust him, just rely on him. He's always there.
That's something to remember.
He's always there, and he's always looking for you.
In the meantime, you have also find your place, not just to come, to listen, to fellowship, to enjoy church life, but you found a place
Yeah.
a good place for you.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that,
I'm
how it
actually-
happened.
Well, I was really interested when I came back. I had made friends with a woman who really wanted to do more with visitors, because we have a similar situation in my current church that we did in the church that I grew up in that a lot of the members live really far out. And so when somebody comes to visit, it's hard to fellowship with them. It's hard to bring them home, especially like if you live on one side of the city and the church is on the other, and then the visitor like lives down here, you know. So what we started doing was reaching out to people that had visited, and that was something that visitors, when we would call them and talk to them, that they would say, you know, it was not, your church is lovely, but it would be nice to have the opportunity to fellowship. And so she and I had said, we should do like she said, we should talk about having a luncheon. We should have like what my mother did. And so I had mentioned that, you know, oh, well, my mom used to do that. You know, here's a couple of ideas. And so we tried to find someone to do it, because she was like, I'm busy, and I'm like, I'm you know, new to the church. I'm like,
I'm shy.
I'm not social. I don't want to be the person that has to reach out to everyone. And so we tried to find someone to do it, and the Holy Spirit kept impressing on me that this needed to happen. And for months, he basically just bothered me and bothered me and bothered me. That same voice that called me out of my pit was like, so you asked for a mission, I gave you a mission, what are you doing? And so finally we said, all right, well, we didn't have at the time a lot of support for the idea, because it had been done before and it didn't work. And I was like, okay, well, I'm obviously not going to get any peace of mind until we do something. So we decided to start doing a luncheon after church every week, where we fellowship with people, we make food. We make food beforehand, we serve, we make sure that the visitors are all met with.
So
and if they,
it's specifically for visitors.
It's specifically for visitors, but everyone's invited to come.
Absolutely.
Anyone from the church who wants to come can bring food. But the point is for the visitors. The point is to, and in that respect, to build community. Because a lot of the members already have community. They have their buddies that they go and hang out with, and that's fine. That's not a bad thing at all. But the point of the luncheons is specifically to bring the visitors in so that folks can be part of our culture as well, our community.
How long ago did you start that?
16 months.
And how it goes?
Oh, it is such a blessing.
Such a blessing.
It is such a blessing, and
In what ways?
It has increased my faith so much. One is just every week I get to see, God reminds me that He's in control. God reminds me He's doing this. Because the piece that, as far as taking it over, that I hadn't mentioned is, since God was, bothering me about this, and I said, okay, this is not my thing. This is not what I want to do by any means. I would rather sit in the sound booth and run sound, personally. But I had said, okay, I need you to support it. You know, the people, anytime you try something new, there will be people that will say that's not going to work. I was like, so I'm going to need people to help with the team. I'm going to need food. I'm going to need resources. I'm going to need all of this. You take care of that. I'll show up. I'll run the kitchen. I'll talk to the visitors. And for 16 months, we've never run short on food.
Oh.
We've never run short on help. Everything runs every week. Some weeks, God asks us to trust Him a little bit more. So. We may not have, a couple weeks ago we had a luncheon where I was panicking, because I'm a control freak normally, and so I like being able to rely on God for this, but I have my moments of weakness where I'm like, but it's not, okay. So we had very little food, and I keep watching people come in, and I'm going, oh, there's no way, we're going to be able to feed everybody. And so I estimated I had about food for 30 to 40 people, and I had about 80 people in the room, and I was like, oh, we're in so much trouble. And I watched people go through line. I watched people go through line again because I was out talking to folks. I watched them go for seconds. I watched them go for thirds. And I went, okay, well, I don't understand the mechanics of that, how that works, but I totally understand the story of the 5 loaves and because I have no idea how that many people got that much food out of what we had, but okay. And at the end, we had just enough. So once everybody was served, I had like a little tiny bit of salad left. I'm going, okay, well, God takes care of it. He provides, and in that respect, I show up and I do my part, and He provides, and I tell my team, if at any point He stops blessing it, then we'll have to figure out what we've done, because He's good. If we're not getting the blessing anymore, then we need to figure out what we've done, because for over a year, God has shown me every week that He is willing to bless me and He's willing to work with me. And if for some reason that stops working, then, but.
Thank you so much for sharing with us your life journey, faith journey. And I'm convinced that this project you have initiated and asked God to prove Himself is going to be a real blessing. One day, maybe a girl like you will show up, and she will find a place where to speak to someone, maybe a shoulder to cry over, or I don't know. You have already some stories, but unfortunately our time is up. That's and the work is still in progress. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
God bless you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for watching The Starting Point, a program produced by Speranța TV, Hope Channel Romania. Until we meet again, may God inspire and empower us to think right, to live with love and courage, to aim high, and to be strong in hope. See you soon.